I went to the bank and borrowed $440,000 on my house as a secondary mortgage to put into the church so we'd survive.
In 2006?
Yes.
It's emotional.
At that moment, it's like 2 weeks later, after we got the money put in the bank, we got the report from Sherri that said she was looking at something, and there was a new statute that said the school could be in the church facility without the county approval. If the school had not been here during the 2008 crisis time, we'd have gone under. So all this is the
Not
house
just
was.
the church would have gone under, you would have gone under.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would have gone under. I lost my house. I would have. I've been bankrupt.
I grew up in a very traditional church, very much organized around boards and committees. I pastored within that structure for about 17 years. I had this dream of starting a church that could be without the politics, that could be to where the pastor could lead.
We came from Tallahassee where my dad was working, and he basically poured all that money that he had made into this church. So we're living at my grandma's house, and it was an interesting time for sure.
We didn't know what the experience would be, but we were all in. In 2002, I needed to take some time off to get direction, so I took 40 days off. In my quiet time there, I had a couple of things that really came through to me. One is I needed to have the strongest staff that I can have, and secondly, it's time to buy land.
We lived out of plastic tubs, so when Larry came back and he said he was looking for land and wanted to build a church, it was just, my heart rejoiced.
I went to an attorney. He said, you want to talk to Dr. Hawkins for 121 acres. It was like $4.3 million. The next day I came in and made him an offer. He basically said $3.8 million, and that's the lowest offer I'll go. But I want you to own it. I said, well, I'll give you $25,000 down and give me 6 months to close. He said, done. Now the amazing thing is, we only had $25,000 in the bank.
How do you buy land with $25,000 and only 400 people attending your church? The way you do that is those 400 people are all in.
We had the land under contract, and immediately I began to realize that we didn't need 121 acres, but if we could sell it, that'd be great. And at the end, one attorney came in and said, hey, I've got a client who wants it all. We'll buy more land if you'll sell it to us. And I said, no, just 40, and it was a big win. I mean, it wasn't just a little thing, that was a big thing for us.
When Larry pointed up and we all looked up and saw that, I don't know if it was jet stream or clouds or whatever, but it was a perfect cross, and it was just so moving. It was really like an affirmation. This is what we were supposed to be doing, and it's happening.
We'd been renting space from the school for years and paying a significant amount of rent for that. But why not turn that around? So that was the plan, that we build a building that would house a school. They would move out here and enjoy this 81-acre campus and this beautiful facilities. We went to Sarasota County to try to get approval for the school to be on our land, and they flat turned us down.
So it was a big lingering question mark. What are we doing with, I think there were 400 kids at the time. What are we doing with 400 students who are starting school in 10 days?
When we needed the money, and I had the conversation with Becky, and we went on our mortgage and we took out a huge second mortgage. We put all that money in the church just to enable it to survive. Realizing that if the church didn't work, we weren't going to make it either.
We never saw that it was going to fail. We saw Larry being confident and, you know, this is a God thing. This is going to happen. It's going to be okay. 3 or 4 days later, one of the people from the school called and said, there's a statute you need to look at in the state law that had been changed within the last few months.
When we found out that the law had been passed that allowed schools to meet within churches, I just remember the look on Larry's face was just pure relief.
I remember walking back to my study, which is in the barn behind where I lived. And I tell it this way, I said, I bumped into Jesus on the sidewalk. I literally laid face down and just wept. The building was completed in August of 2007. The church and school were simultaneously occupying the same space. It was a really good symbiotic relationship. And the rent's being paid, there's money coming in, we're building the staff, we're launching another campus down in Northport. We're really moving. And then the economy hits in 2008. And because of the financing that we had at that time, our payment went up $36,000 a month in one day. And it was devastating to us. And we had to go into retrenchment. And we had to back off on a lot of things that we were doing. We closed the Northport campus. We had to let some staff go. And maybe it's because the culture at that time was just so shell-shocked. People needed something to hang on to. But we saw highest attendance growth year after year after year.
We just continued to grow and to grow and to grow, and the volunteers stepped up in every aspect. And so that was so important at that time because we didn't have the money to hire more staff, and so our volunteers were everything to us during that time.
My dad has always been very big on the story of Jesus. It's not about what you say you believe, it's about how you treat people, how you go out and what you do for people. If there's ever been an example of that, it's my dad. It's the pastor.
Suncoast has never been a church that liked to talk about doctrine or theology.
One of the things that the leadership team decided to do was to get together and to really make sure that everyone's on the same page. And we began reading a book by, I think it was Patrick Lencioni, called The Advantage. And it was talking about how different companies have great product, but what makes them succeed is their culture and their leadership and everyone being just in a really cohesive place.
Before we even got to step 2, one of the guys bolted and said, I just can't be a part of this. Almost like we were heretics.
One day I remember I was sitting in the office and Ryan came in and he sat on a stool and he said, "Are you leaving?" Because people were staying, and then the next day we'd come in and so-and-so left and so-and-so left, and it was, what? You know, so it's so shocking. And he looked at me, he said, "Are you gonna leave?" And I said, "Family don't leave, baby. I'm not going anywhere. These people have been so good to me through so much."
Hurt my feelings a little bit. It's not that we were a new Suncoast with a new day. It was probably the first time we articulated the boundaries that we want to keep away from. We don't want to be a fundamentalist church. We don't want to be a church that damages people or scares people.
During this time, it was really amazing because not just the staff, but the people that come to Suncoast were asking questions, big questions. So that kind of facilitated Suncoast Talks. It expanded people's minds. It had people reading new things, listening to new podcasts, honing in on what they believe instead of just toeing the line and following what you've always thought.
Suncoast is probably more informed, more educated, more unified than any church I've ever been a part of in my lifetime.
I think it's a healthier bunch. I think we're more united, we're more on the same page. It almost feels like it did when we first bought land.
This is one of the sweet places of life, and we're there right now. And it's great to celebrate 20 years in a sweet spot.